Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Sidetrack here, bringing you another Minecraft tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about thermodynamics item ducts, and all accompanied accoutrements to said item ducts. Item ducts are great items, or because they go in the world and they allow you to transport items from one inventory to another. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So thermodynamics gives us four main types of item ducts. They range from the regular old item duct, the impulse item duct, the fluctuating item duct, and the warp item duct. Now there are two versions of each of these pipes that function identical. There are the clear versions, and then there's the opaque version. Now all item ducts do the same thing. They transport items from one place to another. But the differences are the speed at which that happens. So if we take a look over here, we can see that the basic item ducts are on the bottom, and the fluctuating item ducts are above them. They both transfer items at the same speed. On the top we have impulse item ducts. They have been infused with glowstone, which gives things added speed, and items zip through them at a much quicker pace. So the type of item duct you use is one thing that's going to impact the speed at which items move through it. There is another thing, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So then some of you are asking, well, if our item duct and our fluctuating item duct transfer things at the same speed, why would I ever want to use a fluctuating item duct? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's drop a resonant energy cell right here and set it to export power or output power out the back. So the fluctuating item ducts are going to transfer not only items, but they will also transport power. So let's see. Setting out the back. Oh, I know why. It's got a redstone signal. Let's tell it to ignore redstone signal. And you can see that the energy is draining out of this redstone energy cell, and it is being added to this resonant energy cell. So not only can you use the fluctuating item ducts as a means to move items around your base, but you can also use it to move power around your base, saving a little bit of space. Great. So there are these three item ducts. Well, what about these warp item ducts? Well, they're pretty cool. Warp item ducts transfer items, but they do it at a much faster pace. In fact, if you take a look at this pipe, it comes through this wall, around, completely unnecessary length to reach this chest. Well, if we were waiting for, say, regular items to go through a regular item duct, it would take a very long time. The warp item ducts are great because no sooner do they leave the chest than they appear at the destination. It's just an instantaneous transfer of power, or excuse me, of items. Now, the ducts flash every time they transfer an item. I don't know if you saw that. That was pretty quick. And the cost at this amazing transportation speed is a little bit of a little bit of redstone flux. It costs 50 redstone flux for every stack of items to move through the network. Whether that stack is a 1 item or 50 or 64 items, it doesn't matter. Every stack costs 50 redstone flux. So these are great if you have a very large base, or maybe you're just a little impatient, you have more items than you know what to do with. Warp item ducts, pretty cool. So how do we use these item ducts? Well, pretty much like any other item. You right click and you place them in the world. You can use both the clear item ducts and the opaque item ducts. They will connect, as will any of these other types. You can see that they will try and connect to each other. However, if for some reason you don't want things to connect, you can right click on the item duct with a crescent hammer or any buildcraft compatible wrench, and it will disconnect. If you later want to go back and reconnect it, just right click on the same face. Very neat. Now, item ducts will try to connect to inventories and to other item ducts by default. Now, if for some reason you don't want it to connect to a chest, like say right here, I want it to go to this redstone furnace, not to this chest, well, right click on the little nozzle and it will disconnect from that chest, and now it will not interact with it. Pretty great. I can go ahead and connect it to this redstone furnace instead. You can also have multiple outputs or inputs, not too picky. However, if say maybe you don't want it to connect to the redstone furnace, You can also deactivate this side of the redstone furnace, and it will also uncouple the item duct. So you can later go back and maybe tap it into the top if for some weird reason you aesthetically want it to go into the top. Perfectly fine. As I said, it will connect to other item ducts, and just like with the regular, we saw over there, you can connect it or disconnect it by right-clicking with the crescent hammer. Excellent. So over here you see items moving through the item duct, and that's what we're going to talk about next. How do you get items into the item duct? If you remember from previous versions of this mod, you could just right-click on the end and it would turn it into an output node, if you will. That doesn't work anymore, obviously. So what do you have to do? Well, there's a whole host of wonderful things called servos, retrievers, and filters that help you either put items into the network or decide where those items should go. So let's take a look at servos first. We're going to look at the first 3 tiers of servos: the servo, hardened servo, and reinforced servo. If you hold down Shift, you can see all the options that each of these have. We're going to start with the basic servo because it is by far the simplest. So let's go ahead and throw the basic servo on this basic item duct. You right click it on there. If you were playing a real version, real Minecraft, this would get used up, but since I'm in creative, I can use it unlimited times. So let's take a look at the GUI. In the GUI, it's pretty simple. You have 3 slots that you can filter items with. You have this blacklist, whitelist button that I'll talk about in a second, and then you have the stack size. So you can decrease the stack size down to 1, increase it up to 4. Great. Well, if I wanted to export everything that's in the chest, leave it as a blank blacklist. That means that there are no items that are ignored, because blacklist says ignore the item that's in here. So if for some reason you had a whole bunch of creative portable tanks because you're a cheater, and you don't want those creative portable tanks to get exported, say blacklist of creative portable tank. Then everything will get pulled out except for the portable tank. Of course, opposite, if you only wanted to pull out the portable tank, change it to a whitelist. Great. All right, there's one more option that we need to look at, and that's the redstone control. So you have 3 options for redstone control. You have a high, a low, and ignored. High signal says that it will only export when there's a high signal. Low says that it will export all the time unless it gets a redstone signal. And ignores will always export items regardless of the signal. So we've got on a high redstone signal right now. So if I go ahead and flick this switch, you'll see that this lights up and it will try to start exporting items. Well, there's nothing in here. So let's go ahead and throw these creative portable tanks in there. They're not getting exported. Why is that? Well, remember, we have them as a blacklist. So let's throw something else in there. Let's throw some copper ore in there. Give it a second, and very slowly, they will start getting exported from this pipe 4 at a time, just like we have in our options. They will move through the network, and they will end up in a chest. If for some reason you have no chests on your network, well then what happens? Well, obviously these can't go anywhere. So they will end up working their way back towards this servo. You can see that no more copper is going to get exported. And once the copper starts reaching the servo, we've got a red ring around the servo. That means the servo is backstuffed. The only way to clear that is to either shift and right-click on the item duct, which will break the item duct, I'll show you on this one, and pop it off that you can use in your inventory, or to provide it a chest. So now this has a node. Items should, there we go, start appearing here, and then it will start continually adding more copper to this chest because this is the only place it can go. So that's basics of filters, but they get a little more complicated than that, of course. So let's go ahead and turn this off and take a look at the hardened servo. So hardened servos have an additional option. You can use metadata. Well, what's metadata? So certain items like tools, these pickaxes that have mysteriously appeared in my inventory, store their damage values as metadata. So you can see the colon after the iron pickaxe 257:4 tells you that it's partially damaged. This one is :7. It's a little bit more damaged. And this one is perfectly healthy not damaged at all. So metadata tells you whether to pay attention to that extra information. So if we're going to use metadata, we're going to say the only items that we do not want pulled from this chest are the perfectly clean pickaxes, not damaged at all. So if we clear this out and throw these two pickaxes in here, upon applying a redstone signal, we will notice, throw all of them in there, that, oh, we need an inventory for this to go to. That would be important. We will notice that the two damaged iron pickaxes will get pulled out, but the iron pickaxe itself that is not damaged will not be pulled out because we're telling it to ignore the iron pickaxe. If, however, you say ignore metadata and we throw these two iron pickaxes back in here, it's going to ignore that number after the colon, and all iron pickaxes will be on the blacklist, so they will not be pulled out at all. So that's very useful if you're creating some kind of automatic repairing system for your tools. You want to have it pay attention to the metadata so that it only takes out the damaged picks to get repaired. Excellent. So next, we're going to look at the reinforced servo. So the reinforced servo has all of the options that a servo can have. We've got the blacklist, we've got a larger filter. If you didn't notice, the filter gets larger with each tier of servo. We have the metadata, and now we have NBT data. Well, what the heck is NBT data? Well, NBT data is found on different objects, most commonly found on enchanted books and other things like that. So we can decide whether to pay attention to NPT or not. If we have, say, the projectile protection 1, and we're going to use NBT, if we throw these in here, then pull out the fluctuating item ducts, the only things that will get blacklisted, as in not taken out, are the projectile protection. Let's go ahead and turn this on and see what happens. So it's going to pull out the other two books and leave projectile protection in here. Great. If we, again, ignore the NBT, then any enchanted books you put in here, just like with the OR dictionary, or the metadata, brain not working, they're all going to get ignored. Excellent, or left in there. Next up on our list is the OR dictionary. Well, the OR dictionary is a really ingenious idea that was added because some mods, like say forestry and industrial craft, both add copper to the game. And Minecraft needs a way to know that this copper and that copper are actually the same thing and should be usable in alternate recipes. So it doesn't matter what kind of copper you have, copper should be used to make whatever you're trying to build. So in servos, you can decide to ignore the OR dictionary or use the OR dictionary. If you ignore the OR dictionary and put only one type of copper ore in here, if we throw two types of copper ore, it will pull out the copper ore that you do not have blacklisted and leave the copper ore that you'd have blacklisted. Let's grab that copper ore back. Hurry up. There it goes. Okay. However, this could be useful if you are trying to sort out your different types of ores, but maybe you're just trying to process all of your ores, and you don't really want to have to put every single different copper ore, especially if you look, based on the, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of copper ore in this, what I'm running. I don't really want to fill up my servos with, copper ore. I only want to have one type, so I can use the OR dictionary, and that way, any type of copper ore that's in here, let's say I set it to a whitelist, will get exported. I don't have to have it all on the filter, which is great. The last thing to talk about is the mod owner button. Okay, well, let's throw some fluctuating item ducts in here. Who's the mod owner of fluctuating item ducts? Well, see in blue, it says thermodynamics. So if we use the mod owner, set this as a blacklist, so we want to ignore everything that's from thermodynamics and throw all these different things in here. Redstone signal is on, but because we are using the mod owner, it's saying, hey, anything from thermodynamics, don't send through because it's a blacklist. And it all just sits there. Great. You will notice, however, that I threw some resonant energy cells in there. And those are from thermal expansion. So this is a different mod. Even though it's the same mod author, it's a different mod as far as Minecraft is concerned. And so they got pulled through. So sometimes mod author isn't quite what you think. It's not the actual author. It's the owner, I should say. The owner is whatever is in the blue text. So sometimes things like, buildcraft, or in this case, thermodynamics, thermal expansion, and others, redstone arsenal, that you in your head you think they should all go together because they're all meant to, but you look at the blue text, makes sense. All right, whitelist, and we can pull everything out. Great. All right, the last button to talk about is pretty self-explanatory. The nearest first, furthest first, random, or round robin. This tells you what chests do you want stuff to go to. So if you have nearest chest, it will work along down the lines and find the nearest chest that can accept items. Now you'll notice that there are servos on both of these chests, so they don't count, even though this one is the nearest. It can't accept items, so we skip it. So where's the nearest chest? Well, it would come straight down here to this crystal chest. It can accept items, so that would be the nearest chest. Farthest chest would be down here. And then, well, what is this thing called round robin? Let's throw some ores in here. I set the stack size down to 1, so this will take a longer time. I should also mention that, you can click on this. You can, if you really want to click a million times, you can also hold down Shift and move it up by 16. Makes it much, much easier than just doing it single. So, back down to 1. Turn on our lever. Let's wait for our items to start working their way down so I can demonstrate round robin to you. So round robin is basically an even split. Do I have something set up on here? Oh, I have a blank whitelist. I need a blank blacklist, so then things will actually start moving through the pipe. If you ever have a problem, things are not flowing the way you want, check your filters, check your blacklists, check to see if you have servos. All right, so this is now going to the nearest first. You can see that all items are going into this chest. Well, I said that I wanted it to be round robin. So round robin is going to send it to an even split. Now you'll notice that they're still all going here. What's up with that? Well, it's important to note that items are routed based on when they leave the servo. So you can now see that we are evenly splitting our items. We've got one going to the top, one going to the middle, and then one going to the bottom. This would actually make a lot easier to see if I disabled that. And so what we'll end up with, 7 down here, 7 up here, and this one doesn't really count because it had a whole bunch going to it all by itself. So 1 to the top, 1 to the middle, 1 to the bottom, 1 to the top, 1 to the middle, 1 to the bottom. Great. So that's servos. Now, there are 2 more servos that I didn't show you, the signalum servo and the resonant servo. The only difference between those and the reinforced servo is the speed at which they extract items and the speed at which they move items through pipes. So let me show you that really quick. All right, so on top we have a resonant servo. On the bottom we have a basic servo. So you can see that not only is the resonant servo exporting or extracting items from the chest much faster, but they move through the item duct at a much faster speed because it actually boosts it 3 times. Like I showed you before, you can hold down Shift and see the extracts, speed bonus and the extraction rate of both of these. Pretty cool, right? So as you can see here, servos are not the only thing that you can stick on pipes. We've got retrievers and we have filters. Well, we're going to start with the retrievers because, well, they're a lot like servos, except in servos, go on the chest you want it to extract from. Retrievers go on the chest that you want things to be extracted to. So the basic retriever has the exact same GUI as the basic filter, and it functions exactly the same. So if you have a blank blacklist, it will try and export any item possible, set this down to 1, from the chest in question. So it will search all along the pipes, and it will find the nearest chest that can extract items. And it will start pulling items from that chest. So we can see right now, it is pulling copper from this chest up at the top. You're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, the nearest chest is the straight shot. Well, there's a problem. This hardened servo is not allowing the retriever to pull from this chest. So if we right click to remove that servo, to remove it from both of these, you will then see that it will stop exporting from the top chest, and it should start exporting from the middle chest. There we go. So now you can see. Pretty good. All right, so that's the basic retriever. What is the most advanced retriever look like? I'm going to skip the middle ones because they're very similar to filters and you really don't need to see it again. There are only a few tiny differences between the retrievers and the filters, or excuse me, the servos. So you have this additional option right here. This is the total amount of items you'd like to have in the inventory. So an infinite means it'll continue to pull until there's no room left. Or if, say, you want to only have, let's do 20 items in the inventory. So there are copper. Let's get rid of all the copper ore. So we wanted to pull 20 copper ore. Well, let's ignore redstone. And zoop, 20 copper ore right there. Since this is the resonant retriever, it can pull a stack size up to 64, but we only want 24 to be in this chest. So there, or excuse me, 20 to be in this chest. So there we go. Nice and simple. So retrievers are like remote servos. They will pull from any inventory. And that's very useful, especially if you have copper in multiple chests. Well, now we just sucked it all out, and it's all in this one chest. Pretty useful, especially if you're trying to do an ore processing line. You can put one each of all of the ores in here, and then you'll have all of the ores, pulled from wherever to end up in, say, maybe, a pulverizer or a furnace. It's up to you. The last items or group of items to look at are filters. Now, filters are placed just like the retrievers on the chest that you'd like them to go on. So I've already gone ahead and put resonant filters on these 3 chests because this is where we want items to end up. Now, the filters are going to have one additional option that you don't see on the other retrievers or servos, and that's the prevent oversending button. So that means that if you set, say, 10 items, you only want there to be 10 items. You don't want it to oversend. So you can prevent oversending. Also, if you have it on infinite and there's, the chest gets to be full, preventing oversending will keep it from sending more items that can fit into the chest, and then, it prevents things from backing up into your, networks. All right, so how do we want to set this up? Well, let's see. So we can, let's use the mod owner and say that anything from thermal expansion or thermal dynamics can go into this chest. We'll set it as a whitelist. On this one, let's say put some pickaxes and ignore the metadata. So we'll have pickaxes going in here. And on this last one, I want to have my 3 different types of ores. Although I guess we don't really need to have both copper ores. We can use the ore dictionary. Great. So let's go ahead. Now, filters need to be used in conjunction with a servo. So you need to have a servo that will be able to extract. So let's get extract. Let's see what gets pulled out of here. Pulling all this stuff. Pretty much everything that I filtered. All right. So I said all resonant energy. Oh, you know what? I goofed. This needs to be a whitelist, as does this. Let me reset it. Okay, take 2. Let's turn this on and see what gets pulled out. So there go the thermal expansion, the thermal dynamics things, here's those chests, there goes our ore. Zoop, 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 zoop. All right. So, with just a few quick clicks, we now have a fairly decent sorting system. I mean, it's not going to, of course, sort everything, but does a pretty good job. Now, if, however, you've got extra things that you don't have in your filters, you can just have a blank chest that has no filter on it, and then anything that does not get put into the other chests will end up in this kind of catch-all chest. All right, so there's filters. Pretty simple. So that wraps up my tutorial on Itemducts and servos and filters and retrievers. Hopefully that helps you get some ideas and know how to use it. Please, if there's anything that you don't quite understand, leave a comment below. If you think I did a great job, you think I did a horrible job, let me know, and I'll try to address your concerns. But until next time, this is Sidetrack signing off. Have a great day, folks.